Good morning. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. They will see God. Is that a compelling promise? Let me ask you, is it a compelling promise to you? And I know what we feel like we should say, because this is church and all, and I guess I should say yes, but let me put it to you and see, what really would you say? You will see God. Does that do anything for you? If you kind of feel like you're on the fence, you're not alone. The Israelites had an opportunity to see God at one time. And they ended up delegating that to Moses. They said, I'll tell you what, you go see God and you tell us what he says. Because God's kind of unpredictable. You know, he shows up on the mountain, there's thunder and lightning. If you touch the thing, you might get fried. So they really weren't all that keen about seeing God. How about you? We know God's invisible, but he does promise that those who, are pure in heart will get to see him. And as we'll see, that primarily is about the future, about what happens after we die, but I think it has present ramifications as well. So there it is again. Do you want to see God? I had to be honest with myself. I've shared with you before that it was in college that I came into a relationship with Christ, and that seemed like a really good thing, but then I had to really come to grips with the fact about how I felt about God, and frankly, I didn't like him. In the place that I grew up, with the God that I was told about, I had the sense that he was always checking, always wanting to know if I was doing what I should be doing. And frankly, he made me very nervous. And so if you had asked me, and if I had been honest with myself, and he said, Mike, do you want to see God? I would have been questionable whether I did or not. What does it take to desire to know God? I think that desire can take a number of different forms. There was an individual who ended up coming to the place where he decided that, I really did want to see God, but the path that he took was a difficult one. It was in a leadership journal about 10 years ago, a ministry journal, which an individual published this article, Lust, Anatomy of the War Within, name withheld. Didn't share his name, and then it wasn't very long into the article before you figured out why he didn't share his name. A 10-year addiction to pornography and strip clubs, all the while actively involved in ministry, but not able to escape the gravitational pull of voyeurism. He ends up then writing about his experiences. And I'm going to quote in part from that article. He read a book by Francois Mauriac, a French gentleman, what I believe, and this is what he says. Mauriac concludes that there is only one reason to seek purity. It is the reason Christ proposed in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Purity, says Mauriac, is the condition for a higher love, for a possession superior to all possessions, God himself. He goes on to describe how most of our arguments for purity are negative arguments. Be pure, or you will feel guilty, or your marriage will fail, or you will be punished. But the Beatitudes clearly indicate a positive argument that fits neatly with the Bible's pattern in describing sins. Sins are not a list of petty irritations drawn up for the sake of a jealous God. They are rather a description of the impediments to spiritual growth. We are the ones who suffer if we sin by forfeiting the development of character in Christ's likeness that would have resulted if we had not sinned. And this man, again, who struggles with this addiction, reading this argument, goes on to say, the thought hit me like a bell rung in a dark, silent hall. So far, none of the scary negative arguments against lust had succeeded in keeping me from it. Fear and guilt simply did not give me resolve. They added self-hatred to my problems. But here was a description of what I was missing. By continuing to harbor lust, I was limiting my own intimacy with God. The The love he offers is so transcendent and possessing that it requires our faculties to be purified and cleansed before we can possibly contain it. Could he, in fact, substitute another thirst and another hunger for the one I had never filled? Would living water somehow quench lust? That was the gamble of faith. I cannot tell you why a prayer that has been prayed for 10 years is answered on the 1,000th request when God has met the first 999 with silence. I cannot tell you why I had to endure 10 years of near possession before being ready for deliverance. And most sadly of all, I cannot tell you why, and he talks about another pastor friend that he had visited who was a very renowned pastor, very powerful, who talking to him, this guy was even caught in a worse addiction than he was. He goes on why the pastor friend, since our conversation after New Hampshire, has gone into an unbelievable skid toward destruction. His marriage now destroyed. He may go insane or commit suicide before this article is published. Why, I do not know. He said, but what I can tell you is that God did come through for me. The phrase may sound heretical, but to me, after so many years of failure, it felt as if he had suddenly decided to be there. After a long absence, I prayed, hiding nothing. Hide from God? And he heard me. 2 totally new experiences have happened to me that I must admit offset by far my sense of loss at the experiences of loss I miss. First, I have just learned that Mariak was right. God has kept his part of the bargain. In a way I have never known before, I have come to see God. At times, not so often, maybe every couple of months, I've had an experience with God that has stunned me with its depth and intimacy, an experience of an order I did not even know existed before. He says, and another thing has happened. Again, something I did not ask for. The passion is coming back into my marriage. He describes, after having this encounter with God, finding the wherewithal to be able to speak to his wife. It was in bed on a steamy summer evening. He describes, I told her nearly everything, knowing that I was laying on her a burden she might not be able to carry. For 10 years she has watched an invisible fog steal inside me, make me act strangely, pull me away from her. Now she heard what she had often suspected, and to her it must have sounded like rejection. You were not enough for me sexually. I had to go elsewhere. But still, in spite of that pain and the vortex of emotions that must have swirled around inside her, she gave to me forgiveness and love. She took on my enemy as her enemy too. She took on my thirst for purity as her thirst too. She loved me. And as I type this, even now, tears streak my face because that love, that awesome love, is so incomprehensible to me and so undeserved, but it was there. My wife is again becoming an object of romance. The act of sex, as often a source of irritation and trauma for me as an experience of pleasure, is beginning to take on the form of mystery and transcendence and inexpressible delight that its original design must have called for. Here's an individual who comes to a place where trying to back away from something he doesn't want to continue with finds a thirst and a passion for God and finds that God, in promising the pure in heart will see him, came through with what he promised. You see that in a number of different places. People who are addicted to some kind of behavior that they want to move away from find in pursuing God the answer to that. Bill Wilson was a hopeless alcoholic, had a spiritual experience in which he connected with God, and that sense of contact with God was what gave him the wherewithal to escape the gravitational pull of alcoholism. And he's the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that movement, you'll find, conscious contact with God is what will keep an alcoholic from diving back into the bottle. Conscious contact with God. It says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. And the promise is fully realized on the other side of the grave. But presently, there is experience that God has for us. Not full experience, not mood-altering experience always, but experience that will help us become who he wants us to be. And it's got to be pretty compelling. Those individuals who spent time with Jesus, Jesus was God. When Jesus was about to leave, he said to his disciples, "He who has my commandments and keeps them, he it is who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and will disclose myself to him." He says to them, "If you obey me, we'll continue to have a relationship." And that sense of relationship was so compelling to them that they were willing to do what Jesus wanted them to do. Again, they didn't have the heart. That came after the Spirit came at Pentecost. They had the desire. When the Spirit came into them, they had the heart to be able to follow through. But they wanted to follow through. The thing you find with people that connect with Jesus, they really want to stay connected to him. You know what I bet? If Jesus was here, you would want to spend time with him. There'd be something about the way he responds to you, his authority, the love that he has. I don't think you would see him as boring. I think, well, that's never how you relate on Sunday mornings, I understand. But for all of us, I think Jesus is compelling. God is compelling. If you want to see God, there's only one route, and that is a pure heart. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. When the Bible talks about the heart, it's not referring only to the emotions. The heart is not just emotion, but a combination of intellect, emotion, and will. Heart is all those things. One verse puts it this way: above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. That's what the heart is, the wellspring of life. It is the inner pool from which thoughts, words, and actions issue forth, flow from. It's that inner place that gives life to everything that comes out of that. The heart is where inner thoughts, feelings, and decisions are born. Pure means not polluted, clean. A pure heart is a clean heart. When the heart is pure, the words and actions which flow out of the center of one's being are pure as well. And when the wellspring is polluted, the lifestyle will reveal it. The results of an impure, unclean heart are impure thoughts and unclean acts. That makes sense? So I think we could say it this way: sick heart, sick words. Sick heart, sick thoughts. Sick heart, sick actions. I've got bad news. It's your heart. If this was a hospital and I were your doctor, I'd have your attention. Some of you have heard these words in hospitals. It's your heart. And it did rock you. When it comes to the heart, it's a matter of life and death. Our present words, thoughts, and actions, and our future opportunity to be in God's presence depend on getting a clean, pure heart. The question is, what is that and how do we get it? What is a pure heart and how do we get it? A pure heart is an authentic heart. That kind of gets at what it is. A pure heart is an authentic heart. Every religion in the world has a concept of clean and unclean, pure and impure. Life and activities are separated into these categories. There's pure and there's impure. There's clean and unclean, holy, unholy, sacred and profane. And in many religions, it's believed that in separating yourself from contact with what is unclean and in keeping in touch with that which is clean, you can keep your life pure. And when you look at the history of religion, what you find is there's a genealogy of groups that have declared that they are going to be the clean ones. The clean ones, the pure ones. In Greek, the word is katharos, and there is, in the Greek civilization, they were the katharoi. Why? They were the clean ones. They were the ones willing to pay the price, willing to do what is necessary to avoid touching that which is unclean, impure, unholy, devoted to that which is clean, pure, holy, sacred. There have been a genealogy of groups over the years. That was the way the Pharisees functioned in Jesus' day. They were the clean ones, the pure ones. They were the katharoi. They separated themselves from anything that was unclean and devoted themselves to those things that were clean. They went so far as to veil their face. There's a sect of the Pharisees I've heard called the bruised and bleeding Pharisees. And the reason why they were bruised and bleeding is that in order to keep from looking lustfully at someone of the opposite sex, they wore hoods that hooded their eyes. And they were called bruised and bleeding because they were always walking into walls. But again, willing to do what is necessary to avoid impure thoughts, impure words, impure actions. This was the way the Pharisees functioned. Look what it says in your worship folder, and they took this very seriously. Psalm 24:3 says, "Who may ascend the hill of the Lord? Who may stand in his holy place?" I think Jesus is thinking of this verse when he talks about this beatitude. Ascending the hill of the Lord, standing in his holy place, is to see him. And he describes who gets to do that. It says, "He who has clean hands and a pure heart." And so the Pharisees took this really seriously. Well, at least the first half. Look what it says in Luke 11. When Jesus had finished speaking, a Pharisee invited him to eat with him. So he went in and reclined at the table. But the Pharisee, noticing that Jesus did not first wash before the meal, was surprised. Then the Lord said to him, "Now then, you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. You foolish people. Did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? But give what is inside the dish to the poor, and everything will be clean for you." Again, the Pharisees believed that the way to remain clean was to steer clear of contact with people, things, and places that were bad, impure, profane, secular, and unclean. They believed that by separating themselves from external purity was the way to remain clean, and they took this to the extreme. They separated animal and plant life into clean and unclean. Pork was considered to be unclean, so they stayed away from it, and those who are Orthodox Jews still do. People who did not know the law were considered unclean, so it was dangerous to sit in a seat that had been previously occupied by someone who was not knowledgeable of the Bible. Why? Because they were unclean, and you need to separate from those who are unclean. Did they make a lot of enemies? I imagine they did, but that was okay because they were going to see God. And that's the way you do it, by having clean hands and a pure heart. And that's why they would clean their hands after walking, doing things in the course of a morning. They would give their hands a ritual cleansing, much like the Muslims do. A ritual cleansing. And in this, they weren't getting dirt off their hands. It's not like go wash your hands before you eat. Because, there might be germs and you don't want to stuff germs in your mouth. But for them, it really wasn't about germs. It was about washing away incidental contact with an unclean person, place, or thing. It's like cooties. Remember cooties? Cooties! Oh, cooties is what you get when you're like in elementary school and you touch a girl. Cooties. I don't know what they are, but they're bad. And they were kind of spiritual cooties. I guess they're bad. And so you have to wash these off. There's a word, taboo. Taboo is a word used within religions to identify that which, if you touch it, has the ability to make unclean go from outside to inside. And that's why the Pharisees washed their hands. Spiritual cooties to wash after touching that which is taboo. With that in mind, you can see how revolutionary Jesus' words would have been, because he took that verse and he put the emphasis not on clean hands, but pure heart. He explained to them that the problem was not located outside of them, but inside of them. He told them that they had a heart problem. If they separated themselves from everything questionable, that wouldn't solve the problem because the problem was inside of them rather than outside of them. That's why geographical cures don't work. Sometimes we feel like, well, to escape doing this, that, or the other, I just need to move to a different place. For the alcoholic, I just need to move to the West Coast, and then my alcohol problem will stay here, or whatever the problem is. The problem is when you walk off the plane, there you are. And there's the problem. The problem is not outside, it's inside. It's not external, it's internal. That's what Jesus was pointing out. It's your heart. I got bad news. It's your heart. Pharisees spent much of their time blaming their external world when all the time their internal wellspring was the real problem. I've read this before, but Max Lucado writes this a story about in Rio de Janeiro. And he went away, had a ham radio, unplugged the ham radio, he thought, but he really unplugged the freezer. Came back after a week or so, and you can imagine what happened when he opened the freezer. He writes, "What is the best way to clean out a rotten interior? I knew exactly what to do. I got a rag and a bucket of soapy water and began cleaning the outside of the appliance. I was sure the odor would disappear with a good shine, so I polished and buffed and wiped. When I was through, the freezer could have passed a Marine boot camp inspection. It was sparkling. But when I opened the door, that freezer was revolting." Are you wondering, now what kind of fool would do that? Read on and you'll see. No problem, I thought. I knew what to do. This freezer needs some friends. I'd stink too if I had the social life of a machine in a utility room. So I threw a party. I invited all the appliances from the neighborhood kitchens. It was hard work, but we filled our apartment with refrigerators, stoves, microwaves, and washing machines. It was a great party. A couple of toasters recognized each other from the appliance store. Everybody played pin the plug on the socket and had a few laughs about limited warranties. The blenders were the hit, though. They really mixed well. I was sure the social interaction would cure the inside of my freezer, but I was wrong. I opened it up and the stink was even worse. Now what? I had an idea. If a polish job wouldn't do it and a social life didn't help, I'd give the freezer some status. I bought a Mercedes sticker and stuck it on the door. I painted a paisley tie down the front. I put a Save the Whales bumper sticker on the rear and installed a cellular phone on the side. That freezer was classy. It was stylish. It was cool. I splashed it with cologne and gave it a credit card for clout. Then I backed away and admired the high-class freezer you just might make the cover of Popular Mechanics. I told it, it blushed. Then I opened the door expecting to see a clean inside, but what I saw was putrid, a stinky and repulsive interior. I could think of only one other option. My freezer needed some high-voltage pleasure. I immediately bought it some copies of Playfridge magazine, the publication that displays freezers with their doors open. I rented some films about foxy appliances. My favorite was The Big Chill. I even tried to get my freezer a date with the Westinghouse next door, but she gave him the... Very good. You've read this. After a few days of supercharged after-hours entertainment, I opened the door and I nearly got sick. I know what you're thinking. The only thing worse than your humor is your common sense. Who would concentrate on the outside when the problem is on the inside? Do you really want to know? A homemaker battles with depression. What's the solution suggested by some well-meaning friend? Buy a new dress. A husband is involved in an affair that brings him as much guilt as it does adventure. The solution, change peer groups. Hang out with people who don't make you feel guilty. A young professional is plagued with loneliness. His obsession with success has left him with no friends. His boss gives him an idea. Change your style. Get a new haircut. Flash some cash. Case after case of treating the outside while ignoring the inside. Polishing the case while ignoring the interior. And what is the result? The homemaker gets a new dress and the depression disappears for a day, maybe. Then the shadow returns. The husband finds a bunch of buddies who sanction his adultery. The result, peace until the crowd is gone. Then the guilt is back. The young professional gets a new look and the people notice until the styles change. Then he has to scurry out and buy more stuff so he won't appear outdated. The exterior polished, the interior corroding. The outside alters, the inside faltering. One thing is clear. Cosmetic changes are only skin deep. He ends. By now you could write the message of the Beatitude. It's a clear one. You change your life by changing your heart. A pure heart is an authentic heart, changed from the inside out. And it's a transformed heart. Receiving a pure heart is first and foremost a gift from God, an undeserved gift from God. Look what it says. God promises, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. I will save you from all your uncleanness. A pure heart is implanted by the Spirit of God. A pure heart is implanted by the Spirit of God. A pure heart is the result of the influence of the Spirit of God on the interior of your life. I'll say that again. A pure heart is the result of the influence of the Spirit of God Himself on the interior of your life. That's where a pure heart comes from. A pure heart is a transformed heart. The Pharisees, you see, we kind of paint them in black and white colors. The fact is, it was not a lack of will. It was not a lack of emotion. It was not a lack of intellect that brought them to a place where they were not able to marshal the kind of life that Jesus would say, that's the ticket. You know what they lacked? They lacked heart. Now we said, wait, time. Heart is intellect, emotion, and will. Intellect, emotion, and will. They had the intellect, they had the emotion, they had the will, they lacked the heart. What do I mean? The interior of a heart, the heart is only changed by supernatural power, which means I don't care how much will you have. You lack the heart to change your heart. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how emotional you are. I don't care how much you cry at some of the songs. I don't care what your intellect, emotion, and will is. Your heart, you don't have the power to promote a transformed heart. That's why I said it's got to be the Spirit. The Spirit's intellect is sufficient. His will is sufficient. The Spirit's emotions are sufficient in order to bring that about. Okay, then, so what do we do? Let me tell you what we don't do first. You know the problem with the Pharisees? They were so busy cleaning the exterior that they had never time to tend to the interior. That seems to be the way it works. So busy, preoccupied with changing the way things look. Well, if how things look is what matters to you, how things really are will never get dealt with. Let me say that again. I think this is the truth. It was truth for them. If how things look is all that matters. Now, how things look matters, but if it's all that matters, how things look never get dealt with. We can be preoccupied from sunrise to sunset, tending to the things that cause us to look good in other people's eyes. And our life can become so consumed with that there's no time to seek God or to seek some kind of inward transformation. Jesus said, "You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself, it must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me." The Pharisees were so preoccupied with doing the things that they needed to do that they missed Jesus. Is that possible still? So devoted to things, maybe even looking good, looking holy, looking religious, so devoted, maybe finances, so devoted getting finances in order, social life in order, sexual life in order, that there's no time to listen to Jesus' words. Now, okay, we're going to start talking about Jesus now. Yawn. You know what it says? Jesus indicated that it's His words that clean the heart. It's His words that clean the heart. See, when you come to Jesus, He knows how you're coming to Him. It's not that he saves his audience for the clean. It's not for the clean. It's for, well, you should know this by now, the poor in spirit, those that mourn, the meek, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. It's not the arrogant. It's not the proud. It's not the righteous. Those are not the ones to whom the kingdom comes and through whom the kingdom flows. It's the guy, like that guy, comes to a place where he says, God, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm in ministry and I cannot escape the gravitational pull of sexual addiction. Comes to a place where he's broken and then finds Jesus revealing himself to him. You know what Jesus said? Clean is not the byproduct of steering clear of unclean. He says, clean is the byproduct of listening to Jesus. So here's the deal. Don't focus on clean. Don't focus on clean. Don't gaze at clean. Are you clean? Are you okay? Focus on Jesus. You understand the difference? If you focus on Jesus and his words, you find clean, because that is the byproduct of listening to Jesus' words. What do you mean? He changes your heart. When you focus on clean, you don't get a changed heart. Why? Because you lack the heart. It's got to be a supernatural deal. And the Spirit of God does it. Look what it says. Pure heart comes from focusing on Jesus' words. It says, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love him. But God has revealed it to us by his Spirit. The Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God. It's a really interesting phrase. You know what happens? God thinks a lot of things, and he doesn't share those things with everyone. The Spirit knows the deep things of God. He searches, and the Spirit is almost like a transmitter. When the Spirit comes into you, there is within you a capacity to know the deep things of God. How does God really feel about you? What does he really think? And when God begins to reveal himself, when his words start to sink in, what you find, that you start to change on the inside. And it's not because you're focusing on clean. It's because you're focusing on Jesus, because it's his words that clean. It's the Spirit that cleans. That's what happens. Focus on Jesus. Don't focus on clean. I think that's why Jesus said, you're already clean because of the word I've spoken to you, so don't focus on clean. Remain in me. Well, is that clean? Jesus saying, look at me. Look at me. Well, that's clean. No, don't. No, look at me. You're already clean because of the word I've spoken. You remain in me. And I'll remain in you, and you'll bear fruit, and you'll change. What do you mean? You'll find a capacity to be the type of person I want you to be. That's what Jesus says. And it won't be because, again, you focus on, It's powerful. A pure heart is a result of focusing on Jesus' words. He goes on, says, who among men knows the thoughts of a man except the man's spirit within him? In the same way, no one knows the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. We have not received the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God. I have a question. If the Spirit of God communicates about God to you, what does he tell you? What do you think? If the Spirit takes the thoughts of God and transmits them to you, what do you hear when the Spirit talks to you? What it says. We have not received the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God. Here it comes. You ready for this? That we may understand what God has freely given us. Here's what that verse says. When the Spirit of God communicates God's thoughts to you, here's what you hear. This is what I freely give you. Freely give me. That's what you want to tell me? What you freely give me? That's exactly what the Spirit of God wants to communicate to you. Wait, time, Mike. You mean he doesn't want to fear and guilt? He doesn't. That's exactly what I'm saying. If you have a relationship with Christ, if you're one of His children, when the Spirit of God takes up residence, what He does is begin to disclose to you what your Father feels about you. Why would He do that? Because if you become engaged with that, guess what happens? Your heart changes. That's why He wants to tell you that stuff. Some of you, many, and I remember a time where I was afraid of the Bible. It felt like a foreign book, cold. God really has good things to say to you. If you don't have a Bible, get one. And keep coming back. We really spend a lot of time trying to drill in what it is that God has freely given us. And that can be a problem. I'm going to ask the worship team to come up. If you've got a behavior issue, come in hope sometimes, I think it might feel like putting a Band-Aid on heart disease. Here's what I mean. Sometimes we feel like what I really need is a kick in the pants. We feel like because we have behavior issues, that all this stuff about God's promises, and we spend a lot of time speaking of God's promises because the Bible says, the last verse, when we gaze as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, we're transformed as we gaze at Him. We'll spend a lot of time talking about promises, and for some of us, we go through a period of time where that feels, come on, just get tough with me. See, you know what will happen if we get tough? It'll change your behavior, but will it change your heart? No, it won't. That comes from understanding what God has freely given you. So what's the challenge? Pure heart is an authentic heart. It's a transformed heart. And God will transform your heart. Jesus says He wants you to focus on Him and His words. Do you want to know God? Do you? Understanding that it's within reach? We're going to sing a song. A prayer. God, it seems like your word says that if we're proud, arrogant, self-satisfied, purity of heart is out of reach. It's for those who are poor in spirit, for those who mourn, the meek, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Those are the ones who end up coming to the place where they understand that they need to listen to you. And God, I guess I pray, I know that we want to escape the gravitational pull of sinful behaviors, but it's possible to want to back away from sin and not want to move towards you, and I don't think that works. Your word indicates that the pure in heart of those who listen to your word, those in whom the Spirit works, there is a surprise that happens in seeking you, that our life begins to change, our hearts transformed. Would you help us to want you? Help us to want you. I pray that we might get to know your word, that we might listen, that we might know the things that you've freely given us so that our heart might change and our lives might change. In Jesus' name, amen.